And Carolyn Ferguson is from the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much.
To her left is Gina Tomlinson, and Gina Tomlinson is from the National Water Commission. The Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, and she is the head of customer experience at the JPS.
Morning.
Good morning. Next to Gina, we have Delano Williams, and Delano Williams is from the National Water Commission.
Good morning.
Good morning, Delano. And next to Delano, we have Colette Good, and she is the Consumer Affairs Specialist at the Office of Utilities Regulation.
Good morning.
And so we have a variety of views, as I promised you before, that we are hoping to, mix it up for you today and have a very vibrant discussion on the guaranteed standards. Now, what format will it take today? Let's go back and tell you about the format. We have welcome and introduction opening remarks by yours truly, which is what I'm doing now. And then we have presentations by the panelists. So we have various discussion segments. Presentations by the panelists will be very short, about 5 minutes each, so they will talk about their own experience with it. And after that, we have 1 second, please. Let me just get this for you. And after that, we have a discussion segment about the guaranteed standards where we will chit-chat a bit about aspects of their presentation and other things that they may not have mentioned in their presentation. Then we want to hear from you, so we do have a question and answer segment. And then after that, we have the vote of thanks and the closing remarks. So we're hoping, all in all, that it will be a very vibrant discussion here today that we're going to have for you. So while we get a little technical matter sorted out, by way of background, we want to tell you that the guaranteed standards were developed for the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited in 1999 and for the National Water Commission in 2001. It was intended that these two utilities were prioritized for the implementation of the guaranteed standards, as they are the largest providers of water and electricity, and they largely provide a monopoly service in Jamaica. So this was in an effort to protect the consumers as well, hence the reason we prioritized these two groups. Consultations were conducted ahead of the implementation of these standards, and feedback was received from various interest groups as part of the preparation for the implementation of the quality of service standards which we had implemented, and from the quality of service standards came the guaranteed standards for the JPS and the NWC. Now, what exactly are the guaranteed standards? Now, the guaranteed standards represent service level agreements between the OUR and utility service providers in the electricity and water and sewage sectors. They are to ensure that service delivery to customers do not fall below the service level. The two main service providers for which standards are established are the JPS and the NWC. The OUR Act, which authorizes the OUR, or the office as we call them, to prescribe standards for the measurement of quality, quantity, and other conditions relating to utility services in Jamaica. Now, what are some of the examples of the guaranteed standards? Now, some of the examples are, for example, we've been talking about it in abstract, so we want to be sure that we can tell you what it is. Some of the examples: response to emergency. We say, for example, for JPS, you have to respond to emergency within 5 hours. If not, then that constitutes a breach. Complaints and queries, they have to acknowledge written queries within 5 working days. Reconnection, they have to reconnect within 24 hours of payments of overdue amount, and reconnection within 5 hours of a wrongful disconnection. And estimated bills, JPS should give customers no more than 2 consecutive estimated bills, provided they have access to the meter. For the National Water Commission, we have billing. So first issue of a bill should be within 40 working days after connection. Complaints, acknowledge written complaints within 5 working days. and reconnection restore within 24 hours after payment of overdue amount and within 8 hours after a wrongful disconnection. And estimated bills should be based on the average of 3 actual meter readings. And those are some of the highlights of the guaranteed standards by way of an opening remark, so we kind of set the stage for what we are trying to accomplish here today. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Colette Good, who will be making the presentation on behalf of the OUR on the issue of the guaranteed standards. Colette, over to you.
Thank you, Liz, and good morning again, my fellow participants, as well as viewers who have tuned into this webinar. Now, following on Liz's general overview and background of the guaranteed standards, my presentation will focus on how the guaranteed standard scheme works, the changes that have been made to the scheme over time, JPS and NWC's performance against the guaranteed standards, as well as to highlight some of the objectives that the OUR want the scheme to achieve. So presently, there are 15 guaranteed standards for both JPS and the NWC. However, 2 of those standards for each entity are divided into 2 parts. So if we were to add those 2, each company would actually have 17 standards. These standards cover service areas which include billing, customer service, metering, and reconnection. Now, when a breach of any standard occurs, compensation is payable to the affected customer by way of a credit to the account. So Liz gave some examples of standards. Another example is where JPS or NWC has access to its meter. If either entity sends more than 2 consecutive estimated bills to any customer, then that customer is entitled to compensation, and the compensation is paid by way of a credit to his or her account. Now, prior to the 2008 tariff determination for the National Water Commission, the compensation mechanism for the guaranteed standards required the submission of claim forms. Based on our analysis that was conducted on the performance of the guaranteed standards scheme, the OUR recognized that the amount that was being paid out as compensation was far less than that which should have been paid out in light of the number of breaches that were committed. So the decision was taken to begin the transitioning of some standards to automatic compensation for the NWC, and we also applied the decision to transition standards to automatic compensation for JPS in the following year. Furthermore, in keeping with JPS's license provision, the decision was taken in the 2014 tariff determination to transition all standards to automatic compensation. So this has been carried out on a phased basis, and currently breaches of 13 of JPS's 15 guaranteed standards attract automatic compensation. For the NWC, 7 of its 15 guaranteed standards attract automatic compensation. How has JPS and NWC performed against the guaranteed standards? Now, the reports received from JPS and NWC covering the period January to September 2016 indicate that both entities reported breaches of approximately 39,000 for JPS and 1,600 for NWC. On average, this accounts for a breach rate of approximately 5% for JPS and 7% for NWC. Now, with a maximum breach of service at least at the prescribed level. We also want to incentivize the service providers to continually improve on its service delivery to utility consumers. On the consumer side, we want to increase consumer awareness of their rights and responsibilities in relation to the guaranteed standards. And this is important since for consumers to know when a breach has occurred and whether they should receive compensation, especially for those that attract automatic compensation, they have to be familiar with the standards. And having become familiar with the standards, we want the consumers to use the guaranteed standards as their tool to hold the JPS and NWC accountable to the prescribed level of service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colette Good. And Colette Good is the Consumer Affairs Specialist for Policy at the OUR. And from the OUR, we move to the JPS, where Gina Tomlinson will be making the presentation on their behalf. Gina?
Thank you, Liz. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity also to share on our guaranteed standards. The concept of holding ourselves accountable and our customers holding us accountable is actually the nature of our job. Everything that we do has a standard associated with it. The standard or quality associated with the installation of service, the delivery of service, the reliability of service. They're not only local standards but international standards that we must adhere to. So the concept of the guaranteed standards is not new to us, and our own internal standards are very much aligned with the guaranteed standards. One of JPS's values is accountability, and as you can imagine, the whole concept of applying a standard and holding yourself to that standard is based on accountability. Outside of our shareholders, JPS is accountable to three other major groups. Firstly, we hold ourselves accountable to our customers. Our customers actually have a much higher standard, believe it or not, than the OUR, and so we're first held accountable by our standards, by our customers. Secondly, we consider ourselves to be held accountable by our colleagues, by our own internal standards and requirements, and then, of course, we're held accountable by the OUR. So we actually have, along with the guaranteed standards which we're going to be talking about today, our charter, the JPS charter, which speaks to the principles, requirements and services and actions that our customers can reasonably expect from us. And in that charter, we have three major promises that we make to our customers. The first is that we will provide an energy solution that matches your needs. The second is that you will be guaranteed exceptional experiences when you do business with JPS. And thirdly, we will ensure that you have people who you can trust when you do business with us. Embedded in the JPS charter are the guaranteed standards, because we do hold ourselves accountable to that standard as well. What you will notice, though, that as it relates to these particular promises, 87% of our customers actually have expressed satisfaction or high levels of satisfaction with the delivery of service that they have been receiving as of 2016. So what we're seeing is that in holding ourselves accountable to these three standards, these three promises, we're able to not only meet the guaranteed standards, but also meet our customers' expectations. As I indicated, the guaranteed standards are a subset of our JPS charter, and they provide a standard or a goalpost against which our customers can hold us as a utility accountable for delivering affordable and reliable service in a fair and consistent manner. Our guaranteed standards would have increased in number significantly from 2001, where we started with about 7 standards, to now 17, as was indicated earlier, as at 2015. What we have been working with is ensuring that we meet at least 98 to 99% compliance, and we're averaging at about 95% now, as you would have heard before. What we are ensuring in working with the guaranteed standards is that step to the OUR should be the very last step that our customers take after having exhausted all of the possible steps to manage their complaint and have their issue resolved internally. But even before we get to the complaint part of things, we want to ensure that our customers have nothing to complain about. So we put our own standards at a higher level than the guaranteed standard. So if our requirement is that something must happen within 5 hours by the guaranteed standards, our internal standard is 2 or 3 hours. If something must happen within 5 days, our internal standard is 24 to 48 hours. So we ensure that we hold ourselves to a higher standard because we know our customers are holding us to an even higher expectation and standard there. We have worked diligently with the OUR for the past 4 years on converting our standards to automatic, and that process will conclude this year. I just wanted to take a moment to step our customers through the compensation process. Because we still have a few of our standards left that are not automatic, I will go through both processes, the automatic and the manual process of compensation. The automatic process, which you'll see displayed, is one that we have tried to automate as much as possible internally as well, because we want to ensure that there is limited human interaction and as much accuracy, timeliness, and consistency in the way that we deliver on the promise to our customers, where if there is a breach of our guaranteed standards, we compensate as quickly as possible within the standard timeline, and there are no challenges for our customers there. It starts where our internal systems run a process to identify every month what, if any, breaches have occurred against all 15 of the standards that are currently automatic. Compensation is then applied to the relevant accounts in the form of a credit amount on your bill. The bills are generated, and on each bill there is a line item that specifies that you have received compensation for the breach of a guaranteed standard, and it appears as a credit on your bill. And of course, our bills are then sent by mail or by email or post to our customers. For the manual process, customers identify a breach, or JPS representatives identify a breach, and a compensation form is completed. That form can be found on our website. We can also email it to you. You can submit it by mail. You can print and complete it. You can email it to us, walk in with it, or you can call once you have a breach of a guaranteed standard. The compensation is applied before your next bill, and once again you will see that compensation amount appearing as a credit line item on your bill, indicating that you have been compensated for the breach of a guaranteed standard. I wanted to give you a little update now on the transition status, how we're going so far as it relates to transitioning to automatic compensation. So as Elizabeth and Colette would have indicated earlier, we have 17 standards in total, and 15 of those 17 are now automatic. The process started in June of 2012, where we were to make automatic 4 of our guaranteed standards. Guaranteed standards 6, 11, 12, and 9. These speak to reconnection within 24 hours of disconnection, wrongful disconnection, that is, if you have been disconnected and you do not have an outstanding amount, the reconnection after wrongful disconnection, which requires that once we identify you've been wrongfully disconnected, you must be reconnected within 5 hours of that. And if there is a replacement that has to be done for your meter, it must be done within 20 days of identifying that there's a defect. We find that we're running between 98 and 99% compliance of those standards. The first major phase of transition into automatic compliance began in June of 2015, where the balance of standards would have been phased into automatic over the next 12 to 24 months. The first was GS1, which spoke to 5 days for new connections, for connections of new service. GS8, that speaks to estimates based on last 3 actual readings. GS10, which speaks to the maximum of 3 months to do a billing adjustment if there is an issue that's found with your bill. And GS14, which speaks to the time period for which we should compensate for breaches, which is 1 billing period. We're also running between 95 and 98% compliance of those. Phase 2, complex connections to be done, which is GS2, complex connections within 10 to 15 days without a quotation, and 30 to 40 days where construction is required. GS4, which requires 40 days for first bill dispatch, and GS13, where we should notify you of a meter change within 1 billing period. We're currently running between 98 and 100% compliance. I can confidently state 100% compliance because specifically of GS 13, we have an automated process that has been put in place where once a meter change is done, because we have everything tracked from beginning to end in our systems that our technicians use. This is a fully automated process. Once they close that work order, then automatically we send a notification to our customers. And this is one of the reasons why we ask our customers to give us updated contact information. Once we have a cell number for you, an email address, or your home address, it makes it much easier for us to become compliant with these standards, because to be able to communicate with you when we do not have updated contact information makes it harder to be compliant with the standards. So we encourage all our customers to ensure that we have an updated contact number for you, specifically a cell number, because we do send text messages to our customers regularly, and I imagine NWC does as well. And an email address, absolutely, as well as your updated mailing address. Those are critical. The third phase, which we are in the middle of now, has to do with the last four standards. GS 7, which requires no more than 2 consecutive estimates, and GS 5, which requires that we acknowledge complaints, written or verbal, within 5 days, and we have 30 to 60 working days within which to resolve that particular issue. Those 2 standards we're currently running as automatic. The last 2, which we are discussing with the OUR, and we'll get into a little later, I assume, have to do with the GS 3 and GS 15. GS 3 speaks to response to emergencies, and GS 15 speaks to the outage time when we're switching a new customer over to the RAMI system. For GS 7 and 5, we're running between 95 and 98% compliance. I'll close with a simple overview of where we see benefits of the guaranteed standards and a few recommendations that we have to improve the process around the guaranteed standards. There are several benefits, as you can imagine, to having standards. The whole concept of accountability, which I indicated, is one of our core values as an organization. It's important not only for us to hold ourselves to a standard or for our regulator, but our customers as well should be aware that there are certain standards that they should hold us accountable to, that there's a promise that we have made, and they should be able to hold us to that. Similarly, it allows us to stretch ourselves. So the OUR says we must do it within 5 hours. Can we do it in 2? Can we exceed the expectations, not just of the regulator, but of our customers as well? Of course, it also helps when we're benchmarking. A lot of our activities internally, we try to improve our standards by benchmarking, not just against other utilities in the region, but globally. We also look, when it comes to customer service, outside of the electric utility to other industries, so that we can use that as a benchmarking guide. So if, for example, one of the guaranteed standards says we should respond within 5 days to a complaint, what's the global standard? Is the global standard 24 hours, especially now with the changes in technology? So we use it as a guide.
To our audience and to my fellow panelists. First of all, I would like to start by congratulating the OUR anniversary of service to the Jamaican public in the regulating of utility services. As an organization, they have certainly come a long way in what is considered a relatively short time for such an entity. This is also on the heels of having confirmed the appointment of your new Director General, Mr. Ansel Hewitt. It is quite notable that the OUR is considered as a standard bearer within the region, to which our CARICOM brothers and sisters, some of whom are joining us on this webinar today. Our CARICOM brothers and sisters rely on the OUR Jamaica for best practices. The CACU knows that the organization does have a long way to go in evolving, and we look forward to your continued growth and maturity. Furthermore, we also look forward to continuing our own close association as the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities. For the benefit of our audience, we'd like to tell you a bit about who is the CACU. We're an independent consumer advocacy body, and we advise the OUR on matters related to the regulation of public utilities. Our committee was established in 2001 and has emerged as the principal voice of the consumers in utilities regulation. We represent the interests of consumers in policy and regulatory decision making to ensure fair treatment of the consumer and their full participation in the consultative process. Further, it is our mandate to make sure that customers are continuously afforded the opportunity and benefit of rigorous and robust public education programs. Good governance and consumer empowerment are integral to the work of the CACU in order to safeguard the rights and responsibilities of Jamaica's paying consumer public. I will touch a little bit on the NWC guaranteed standards. These were reviewed in the 2013 to 2018 tariff review that was done, and at that time we had made a few comments in the interest of the consumer. Back then there were 15 guaranteed standards, and as we would have heard, now there are a bit more, as much as or as many as 17. We felt that at the time we noted the company's submission for an increase at that time was based on purely on the revaluation of assets, and not so much because there were additional expenses or any changes in circumstances. At the time, the base rate increase was 19%, and so there was an overall 29% effect on the bills of consumers. Now, we felt that if there was no revaluation of the assets, the premise on which the tariff was being requested, the tariff increase, we felt that it actually would suggest a decrease. And we definitely feel that there are still areas of service to be improved, and we're happy to hear the NWC giving its own thoughts on that directly. In respect of the JPS guaranteed standards, those reviews were done, or that submission was made in 2014 up to 2019. Now, at that time, 14 guaranteed standards, again, it has gone up to 15, as we would have heard, each with its own unique numbering. Now, we noted there that there was a request that would affect customers' bills by 21%, whereas the smaller commercial customers would see something like a 15% increase, and then the billing for larger customers would be reduced. At the time, a 3-tier structure for residential customers was proposed. We support that, as well as the tiered network access charge. At the time, some changes have been made to date, but at the time we still felt that the plants that the JPS were operating on were inefficient, and so a lot of those costs were transferred to the smaller customers, whereas the larger customers had options that could take them off the grid. So as it is, we spoke to automatic, some of the standards having automatic compensation, and we now see where a number of those are currently converted to automatic compensation. We want to touch on the telecommunications sector. This sector is growing and evolving quite rapidly. It involves the provision of landline services, mobile network services, and more so fiber to the home is currently increasing. And those companies now provide internet, cable, and data services, and not just the traditional voice services. Now, currently there's a draft of the quality of service standards, and quality of service standards help to protect customers and encourage competition, whereas we feel the guaranteed standards for this sector is overdue, because the guaranteed standards speaks to measuring their performance and also compensation to the customer if these standards are not met. So from our perspective, we want to say to the consumer, what are guaranteed standards? It's an agreement which should ultimately lead to excellent customer service. These are determined by the regulator, as you'll see, and shared with the relevant provider. Now, this is an agreement to which the consumer can now hold their service provider to. It's the consumer or the customer, the paying customer, that will make all these guaranteed standards relevant. They have to know what they are, they have to know how to use them, and they have to be empowered to seek resolution through the respective companies first. And we do have both Gina and Delano making reference to this. And coming to the regulator or any other consumer advocate should be a last resort, because the service providers, they do make accommodation for meeting and holding to the guaranteed standards, and customers should know this. Now, we also want to note that having guaranteed standards should not be a numbers game. We did hear from our presenters, there were 7 standards, then they increased to 13, then 17, and so on. But this is not a numbers game. It should be relevant, it should be manageable, and as one presenter noted, it should evolve with time and subsequently be driven by the consumer, right? We should review, these standards are reviewed, and they're reviewed in line with tariff every 5 years, as is currently the practice. And we should have these now introduced for the telecommunication sector. We believe that in light of having guaranteed standards, they're important. We believe they're important in the regulated environment for utilities. We want our consumers to be more aware and more involved. And we also believe that OUR Act should be amended to provide the regulator with enforcement powers. So, ladies and gentlemen, there ends my very brief presentation, and I would like to thank you for giving me a listening ear. And as you can see, you can follow us on Instagram, or you can send us an email with your thoughts, concerns, or comments at cacu2@our.org.gm. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gina. Caroline Ferguson from the Consumer Advisory Committee on Utilities, the CACU. And the CACU is a consumer advocacy group, Caroline?
Yes, it is.
That looks out for the interests of consumers, especially as they relate to utilities matters. We're going to have, because I wanted to highlight some things that you all would have said in your various presentations, and I wanted to start with the CACU, because you seem to think that the review of guaranteed standards really should take place before every 5 years, ahead of every 5 years, or more frequently than 5 years.
What we're noting is the current practice is 5 years. At this point, we do not have an issue with that, because we do note that the utility companies have the option of submitting interim or exceptional requests.
Yes.
So there is no issue at this time with having a 5-year review.
But I would just like to say, though, that for both JPS and NWC, I think since the 2008 or 9 thereabouts, we introduced what we call mid-tariff reviews of the guaranteed standards. Now, there are specifications as to how those reviews are conducted, but in the middle of the tariff, the review is conducted on the guaranteed standards. So,
and we did one recently, if I recall.
Yes, for the National Water Commission.
Both Gina and Delano would have highlighted, I think, some of the challenges in handling complaints. So I want to delve a bit more into that, starting with Delano. What are some of the challenges from your
and applying the requisite compensation? Where the challenges exist is for some of the claims, the timeliness of it, and I suppose it may come down to customers being unaware at times that there is a cut-off period. So the timeline from the date of the perceived breach to the date of their claims, sometimes they go outside of the 120 days in our case, and I think JPS is somewhere around 120 as well. So that proves a challenge, because oftentimes the issue might be valid, but just by mere virtue of the lateness of it, it's something that we now have to say we're sorry.
Gina, from your end?
Sure. Similarly, we would have that type of challenge where the timeline within which the customer actually makes the claim, with most of the standards automatic now, that has eliminated that particular challenge for us. So it is simply a matter of us just ensuring that our processes run smoothly so that we can compensate our customers. However, as it relates to actually being able to meet the standards, there are a couple of challenges that we have. I'd mentioned previously where contact information is very important for us, specifically as it relates to communicating. If communicating is part of the requirement in the guaranteed standard, if we do not have up-to-date contact information, responding to a query or complaint, if you have moved or changed your contact information, then it makes it next to impossible for us to find the individual who we have the account with, to be able to communicate with them, respond to them. In many cases, we send letters and they go to old addresses because we have no updated information. Similarly, access to locations to complete an activity. So our guaranteed standards that require us to connect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect after disconnection, etc., change meters, etc., if we are not given access to the premises, physically being allowed onto the premises, then we cannot complete the activity. So as much as those may be exempt because we don't have access, we still want to be able to complete the job for the customer. So even though it's not considered a breach or a mark against us, we still consider it as such because this is an activity that we want to complete for our customer and we're unable to do so. So we want to encourage our customers. We do try to reach out beforehand when we're coming to do some of these things. Try as much as possible to be there or allow someone to be there who can give us access to the premises so we can reconnect you in a timely manner. We have that especially with gated communities. That's a major challenge we have, as you can imagine, with gated communities being able to get access. There are some gated communities, especially some of the newer ones, that if you do not, it's almost like they want a thumbprint and eye scan we have ID, they're clearly labeled, we've called beforehand, but if you don't have that genetic DNA to get into the location,
that is
unable
a challenge.
To go in, yes. So
and customers have to understand that. Khalid, let me ask you from the position of the OUR, because the OUR does have to report every quarter on performance, and part of the performance report that you have to prepare, which it actually is in your office, is the guaranteed standards performance of the National Water Commission and the JPS. What are some of the constraints, or do you find that there are constraints in receiving it? And talk to us a bit more about that.
Well, in terms of my being able to produce that report,
but tell us a bit more about what is in that actual report from that end.
Okay, it is, we call it the Consumer Affairs Report. It includes information on the performance of the Consumer Affairs Unit over the quarter, as well as information on JPS and NWC's performance against the guaranteed standards for the quarter. So if I do not get the information from JPS and NWC within the agreed timeline, then it will negatively impact my ability to produce this report within my timeline. And I have had to, in the past, just indicate that the reports were not received to be included in the publication.
Are you seeing improvement in recent times?
During 2016, there was an improvement, particularly on JPS's side, because they conducted an upgrade of their customer information system in 2014, and that impacted JPS's ability to collect the data needed to prepare the report, and so there was a fall off in the reporting getting to us, but that improved throughout 2016. With respect to the NWC, we get the reports, but completeness is an issue.
Okay, so we do get it. Okay, so I have to bring the discussion to an end, unfortunately, because time has run out on us. I can't believe how time has flown by. But I want to really thank everybody for logging in. I want to thank our panelists, Carolyn Ferguson from CACU, Gina Tomlinson, JPS, Delano Williams, NWC, and Colette Good. I also want to thank our technical team, Kishana Monroe, who's been handling our Periscope account via Twitter, Julian Channel, Otis Anderson, and of course, Gordon Brown. Thank you so much. I'm Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, and have a good afternoon.